What in the world? I can't believe she got it out. This is impossible. Minutes passed. Nobody spoke. The only sound in the room was the steady beeping of the heart monitor. Then Ivy tilted her head. She leaned closer, her eyes narrowed. "There," she whispered. "What?" Dr. Cross stepped forward. "What did you see?" Ivy pointed at Elliot's throat. "There's something wrong right here. The way his throat moves when the machine helps him breathe, it's not smooth. There's a little bump, a little hesitation, like something is blocking the way." Dr. Cross frowned. "We've examined his throat multiple times. Endoscopies, X-rays, CT scans, we've done everything. But did you check right here?" Ivy pointed more specifically. "Right where the throat bends, where the camera can't reach." The doctors exchanged glances. The machines screamed. Every monitor in the intensive care unit flashed red. Alarms pierced the air like 1,000 crying voices. Nurses rushed past each other, their shoes squeaking against the cold marble floor. And there, in the center of all that chaos, stood a young woman. She was 27 years old. Her clothes were worn and faded. Her shoes had holes in them. She did not belong in this place, a place of wealthy people and world-famous doctors. But her eyes were locked on the bed, on the boy who lay there, motionless, barely breathing. 12 doctors had failed. 12 of the best medical minds in the entire world had looked at this dying child and walked away with empty hands and confused faces. The father stood in the corner, his eyes red and hollow. His perfectly tailored suit was wrinkled. His slicked-back hair was a mess. He was not just any father. He was Marcus Ashford, the most powerful man on the East Coast, a king without a crown, a man who controlled half of New York's underworld. He had offered $50 million to anyone who could save his son. No one could. Until now. The homeless woman stepped closer to the bed. Everyone watched her. Nobody stopped her. Maybe they were too exhausted. Maybe they had given up. Maybe, deep down, they were hoping for a miracle. She leaned over. She opened the dying child's mouth. And then, with steady fingers, she reached inside. She pulled something out, something small. Something that made every single doctor in that room gasp in disbelief. In that moment, everything changed. But before we learn what that object was, and before we discover how this homeless woman knew exactly where to look, we must go back. Back to where this incredible story truly begins. Back to a rainy Tuesday morning, 3 weeks earlier, when a man named Marcus Ashford woke up believing he was in control of everything. He was wrong. If this story already has you hooked, hit that like button and share it with someone who loves a good twist. And if you want to find out what Ivy pulled from that boy's throat, subscribe and stay tuned. Because this is just the beginning. On a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks before everything happened, Manhattan woke beneath a dull, ashen rain. Drops struck the glass like the knocking of fate, but Marcus Ashford didn't notice. He'd been awake long before dawn had time to show its face. Standing before the penthouse's wall of windows overlooking Central Park, he watched the city the way a king watches from his throne, looking down on his own kingdom. 36 years old, cold, controlled. That was the Marcus Ashford the world knew. On his business card, he was the chief executive officer of Ashford Holdings, a sprawling real estate corporation that owned hundreds of buildings along America's East Coast. But that was only the surface of the iceberg. Beneath it, in darkness where light never reached, Marcus Ashford was the true king of half of New York's underworld. Money, power, fear. He owned it all. A knock sounded at the door. Leo came in, Marcus's most trusted bodyguard, the man who'd been at his side for 15 years. Leo's face was taut as he stopped a few steps behind him. "Sir, Donovan still won't cooperate. He says he'll go to the police." Marcus didn't turn around. He kept his gaze on the window, his voice as calm as if he were talking about the weather. "Does he have a family?" Leo answered at once, without thinking. "A wife and 2 daughters. One of them just started college." Silence. The rain kept tapping at the glass. Marcus spoke again, his tone stripped of feeling. "Send him his daughter's school address. Just the address. Don't do anything." Leo understood immediately. "Yes, sir," Marcus went on, still watching the city. "If he's still stubborn by Friday, then we won't need an address anymore. You know what to do." Leo nodded and left, closing the door behind him. Marcus remained where he was, alone in the vast room, not a flicker of hesitation, not a trace of regret. That was how he lived. That was how he became king. In Marcus's world, mercy was weakness, and weakness meant death. He'd learned that lesson early, back when he was a street kid, fighting to survive. Now no one dared lay a hand on him. No one dared meet his eyes. Except one person, Small footsteps sounded behind him. Marcus turned, and something in him shifted. In the doorway stood Elliot, a 12-year-old boy still in his pajamas, hair mussed from sleep. The boy rubbed his eyes and looked at his father with the clearest gaze Marcus had ever known. "Dad, will you have breakfast with me?" And in an instant, the king of the underworld disappeared. What remained was only a father. The hard lines of Marcus's face softened, and the corner of his mouth lifted into a smile no one in the dark world had ever been allowed to see. "Let's go, son." Marcus walked to Elliot and rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. Together they headed toward the dining room, their footsteps muted against the wooden floor. To the outside world, Marcus Ashford was a monster without a heart, a name that made people tremble when it was spoken. But to his son, he wanted to be nothing more than an ordinary father. A father who could eat breakfast with his child, who could laugh with him, who could be the place his boy ran to when he was afraid. Those two halves of Marcus had never met. He'd built an invisible wall between his two worlds so Elliot would never have to know who his father really was, so the boy could grow up clean and bright, untouched by the darkness Marcus lived in. They entered the dining room, where a long table had space for 20 people. Yet only the two of them sat in a corner, close together. Marcus looked at his son and felt his heart soften. Elliot was the only thing he'd ever done right in his life, the only light in his endless dark, and Marcus was willing to burn the whole world to protect that light. He forgot that only minutes earlier he'd given an order meant to threaten a man's family. He forgot that he was living in a world where violence was the only language. Because beside Elliot, Marcus became someone else. But the world would never let him forget for long. The dining room felt vast, with its long oak table that could seat 20 people. Yet that morning there were only the two of them in the corner, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Light from the crystal chandelier spilled over the carefully arranged dishes, but Elliot didn't touch a thing. He sat there, using his fork to push the plate of eggs back and forth, his eyes lowered as if he were thinking about something far away. Marcus recognized it immediately. He set his coffee cup down and looked at his son. "You're not hungry?" Elliot lifted his head, clear eyes meeting his father's without wavering. "Dad, I want to ask you something." Marcus nodded, sliding the newspaper aside. "Go ahead." Elliot was quiet for a moment, as if he were trying to line his thoughts up in the right order. Then he asked, his voice small but steady, "Why do some people have to sleep on the street?" Marcus went still. Of all the questions he'd imagined his son might ask, this wasn't one of them. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Elliot continued, his tone carrying the confusion of a child trying to make sense of the world. "Yesterday, when the car went past street, Michael's, I saw a girl standing outside the church. She looked so cold, Dad. Her clothes were old and torn, and she was standing there alone, in the rain." Elliot paused, frowning as he searched for the right words. She looked like nobody could see her, like she was invisible. Marcus felt something tighten in his throat. He looked at his son, a 12-year-old with a heart too large for this world. "It's complicated, son." Elliot tilted his head, studying his father with an expression Marcus couldn't read. That's what adults say when they don't want to answer. The words cut Marcus like a blade. He couldn't respond. He just sat there, staring at his son, the most powerful man in New York, suddenly awkward in the face of a child's question. Elliot didn't wait for an answer. He went on, his voice carrying the sincerity only children can have. "We have so much, Dad. Our house is as big as a castle. We have good food every day. We have warm clothes, soft beds." He glanced around the lavish dining room, then looked back at his father. "They have nothing. Why can't we share?" A long silence. Marcus heard the rain striking the windows, heard the clock ticking on the wall, heard his own heartbeat thudding hard in his chest. Only minutes earlier, he'd ordered a threat against a man's family, and now his son was asking him about compassion. The two worlds collided in Marcus's mind, and he didn't know what to say. Elliot added, his voice light as breath, "I think maybe they don't need much, Dad. Maybe they just need someone to see them, so they know they're not invisible." Marcus looked at his son and felt his heart being squeezed shut. Elliot was 12, but he understood what Marcus had deliberately forgotten for 20 years in the dark, that every person had value, that every life mattered, that sometimes what people needed most wasn't money, but to be seen. Marcus's phone rang, shattering the moment. He glanced at the screen, then back at his son. Work was calling. Always work. Marcus rose, something heavy settling in his chest. "We'll talk more about this tonight, all right? I promise." He stepped to Elliot, bent down, and kissed his forehead. Elliot looked up at him, his eyes still full of questions that hadn't been answered. "You'll remember, right? You forget a lot." Marcus paused at the doorway and turned back. His son sat there, small in that enormous room, and Marcus felt a sharp ache in his chest. "This time I'll remember." He said it, and he truly believed it. But tonight never came, because only 3 hours after that breakfast, Marcus received the call that shattered everything, the call after which his life would never be the same again. 3 hours after that breakfast, Marcus was sitting in the conference room on the highest floor of the Ashford Holdings building. Around him were the most dangerous faces in New York, the bosses who ruled different parts of the city. They were discussing a major deal, millions of dollars being divided up on the table, and Marcus was the one with the final word. But his mind wasn't here. He was still thinking about the morning, about Elliot's question, about the invisible girl standing outside the church. The phone in his jacket pocket vibrated. Marcus meant to ignore it, but then he saw the number calling. Elliot's school. His heart slammed as he answered. The voice on the other end was trembling. "Mr. Ashford, your son collapsed. Right in the classroom. We don't know what happened. An ambulance is on the way." Marcus didn't hear anything after that. He shot to his feet in the middle of the meeting, the chair crashing to the floor. The bosses around him stared in shock, but Marcus didn't say a word. He lunged out, ran down the corridor, ran down the stairs, ran as if his life depended on every single step. For the first time in 20 years, Marcus Ashford ran like an ordinary man. Not like a king, not like someone the whole world was supposed to fear, just a father running to his son. When Marcus reached the hospital, Elliot was already in the emergency room. The boy lay there, small and fragile, with wires and tubes tangled across his body. Machines beeped all around him, lights flickered, and Marcus felt his world collapsing. The attending doctor came to him, face tight with strain. He collapsed suddenly. There were no warning signs at all. "We're running every test we can." Marcus grabbed the doctor by the collar, his eyes bloodshot. "Then find it. I don't care how much it costs. Find the problem and fix my son." The days that followed passed like a nightmare with no end. Marcus called in the best doctors from all over the world. A specialist from Johns Hopkins flew in, examined Elliot for hours, then shook his head with a baffled look. A professor from Mayo Clinic came next, bringing the most advanced equipment. But in the end, he was helpless too. Then came specialists from London, from Tokyo, from Berlin. 12 of the top doctors in the world. 12 times hope, 12 times failure. Each one said the same thing. "We can't find the cause. We don't understand why he can't breathe normally. We're sorry." And while doctors came and went, Elliot only grew worse. His skin shifted from pale to a dull gray. He couldn't speak anymore. He could only look at his father with exhausted eyes. Every breath was a battle, and Marcus had to stand there powerless, watching his son slowly lose. On the 10th day, while Marcus sat beside Elliot's bed, Leo walked in. The face of his most trusted bodyguard was tighter than ever. "Boss, there's something." Marcus didn't take his eyes off his son. "What?" Leo swallowed. "Russo. He's pulling people to his side. He's telling everyone you've gotten weak, that you can't control things anymore." Silence. Only the steady sound of the breathing machine. Leo went on, voice edged with worry. "If you don't show yourself within 48 hours, he'll declare he's taking over the East. That's 15 years you built, boss. 15 years. Marcus kept looking at Elliot. The boy lay there, unmoving, and Marcus saw his lips twitch slightly, as if he were trying to say something but couldn't. "Let him take it." Leo froze. "Boss." Marcus turned, and Leo saw what he'd never seen in his boss's eyes. Pain, desperation, and the exhaustion of a father watching his child fade. "I said, let him take it. Take everything. The East, the West, all of it. I don't care." Leo stepped forward. "But boss, that's everything you have." Marcus cut him off, his voice sharp as a blade. "Do you have children, Leo?" Leo stopped. "I do. 2. Marcus nodded slowly. "If they were lying here, on this hospital bed, breathing through a machine, and you didn't know whether they'd be alive tomorrow." He paused, his voice tightening. "Would you care about territory?" A long silence. Leo didn't answer, because he knew the answer. Marcus turned back to Elliot, took his son's small hand in his. "I spent 15 years building that empire, 15 years in the dark, but if my son dies, it's all just ashes." He squeezed his son's hand tighter. "Let Russo take it. Let the whole world take it. I don't need it." Leo stood there a moment, then quietly left, and Marcus stayed, alone with his son in the cold hospital room. That night, when the hospital sank into quiet, Marcus sat beside Elliot's bed, holding his hand, his own hand trembling. He bowed down until his forehead touched the boy's small hand. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry for everything. I've done terrible things. I've caused so many people pain. I'm a monster." Tears fell, for the first time in 20 years. "But you're the only thing I've ever done right in this life. You're my only light." He lifted his head and looked at his son's face, gray and exhausted. "Please don't take him from me. Please give me one chance." But Elliot didn't answer. He only lay there, breathing weakly, and Marcus felt his hope draining away with every passing second. The next morning, Leo came back. "Boss, what do you want to do next?" Marcus looked out the window, where dawnlight was spilling through. He remembered that morning, 3 weeks earlier, breakfast with Elliot, his son's question about homeless people. About the girl outside Street Michael's. The girl, Elliot said, looked invisible. "Get the car ready," Marcus said, his voice weak but steady. Leo stared at him, startled. "Where are you going, boss?" But Marcus didn't answer. He only stood and walked out of the room, leaving Leo with 1,000 questions and no answers. The black car glided through Manhattan's streets, and Leo sat behind the wheel, constantly checking the rearview mirror. His boss sat in the back seat, eyes fixed on the window, yet not truly seeing anything at all. In 15 years of following Marcus Ashford, Leo had never seen him like this. Broken, desperate, like a wounded animal searching for somewhere to hide. "Boss, where are we going?" Leo asked again, but Marcus still didn't answer. He only sat there in silence, and Leo didn't dare push any further. In his mind, Leo tried to guess what his boss was thinking. Maybe they were headed to some black market doctor, the kind of doctor Marcus could buy with money and fear. Or maybe they were chasing some forbidden drug from somewhere, the kind of remedy respectable medicine refused to touch. Marcus Ashford was the sort of man who could get anything, even the things ordinary people could never reach. But when the car came to a stop, Leo went still. In front of them stood an old church on a street corner, its paint peeling away to reveal dull gray patches underneath. The stained glass was cracked, parts of the roof tiles were broken, and the wooden sign hanging by the gate had faded with time, yet the words could still be read. Street Michael's Church. This was the poorest area of Manhattan, a place where cars like theirs never appeared. "Boss, this is?" Leo turned to Marcus, unable to hide his confusion. Marcus opened the door. "Wait in the car." Then he stepped out without another explanation. Leo watched him walk toward the church, and in 15 years of working for Marcus Ashford, this was the first time Leo truly had no idea what he was doing. Marcus pushed open the heavy wooden door and stepped inside. The first thing he felt was warmth. Outside, the air was still cold and damp after the rain, but inside the church it was gentle and warm. Candlelight flickered everywhere, casting a soft glow Marcus had forgotten existed. The church wasn't large, but it was clean and orderly. The pews were lined up neatly, and along one wall stood long tables covered with food. Homeless people formed a line to receive their portions, their faces tired, yet no longer hollow with despair. They had a place to eat, a place to shelter, and someone who cared whether they made it through the day. Marcus stood in the doorway and felt completely out of place. His expensive suit, his polished leather shoes, the watch worth tens of thousands of dollars on his wrist. Everything about him shouted that he did not belong here. But no one looked at him with hostility. They looked with curiosity, then returned to their meal, as if he were just another stranger searching for something. "You look like a man who's lost." The voice came from behind him, and Marcus turned. Standing before him was an elderly nun, perhaps about 65, with hair white as snow pulled neatly back. She wore the traditional black habit, and on her chest was a simple silver cross. But what caught Marcus most was her eyes, bright as stars, yet full of understanding and compassion. The eyes of someone who had seen too much, understood too much, and still chose to love. She stepped closer without a trace of fear, and that surprised him. Most people were afraid of him. Even those who had never met him knew to keep their distance. But this woman looked straight into his eyes as if he were an ordinary man. "Do you know who I am?" Marcus asked. The nun smiled. "Everyone knows Marcus Ashford. You're the man this city whispers about, the man people tell stories about in fear." She tilted her head. "But that isn't the right question." Marcus frowned. "Then what is the right question?" The nun studied him, her gaze gentle but sharp. "The right question is this. What have you come here looking for?" Silence. Marcus felt something tighten in his throat. He was used to giving orders, used to controlling every conversation. Yet, in front of this woman, he felt stripped bare, as if she could see through every mask he'd worn for years. "My son is dying." At last he spoke, his voice rough. And I can't do anything. 12 of the best doctors in the world have looked at him and shaken their heads. I can buy anything, but I can't buy my child's life. The nun nodded slowly, as if she had heard this story many times before. I'm Sister Catherine. I've run this place for 32 years. She looked around the church, where the homeless were eating and talking. I've seen thousands of people come through here. They come when there's nowhere else to go, when the world has abandoned them, when hope has run dry. She turned back to Marcus. So you've come to the right place. Marcus didn't understand. I need a doctor, not a church. Sister Catherine smiled, the kind of smile that carried the knowing of someone who had lived through decades. 12 doctors failed. Is that what you're telling me? The best, the richest, the most highly trained. She gave a small shake of her head. Miracles don't come from glamorous places, Mr. Ashford. Miracles come from places people can't be bothered to look at. Sometimes the person who can save you is the person the whole world forgot. Marcus stayed silent, trying to grasp what lay beneath her words. Who are you talking about? Sister Catherine didn't answer right away. She only smiled and looked toward the corner of the church, where a young woman was handing out food to the homeless. The girl your son saw. Marcus turned, and he saw her, thin, with chestnut brown hair falling to her shoulders, wearing old clothes that were worn but clean. She bent down to pass a portion to an elderly man, a smile on her lips that was warm and sincere. Then, as if she sensed someone watching, she looked up. Blue-gray eyes met Marcus's, and in that moment, Marcus understood why Elliot had said she looked invisible, because she was the kind of person the world never stopped to see, the kind of person people walked past, forgot, treated as if she did not exist. Yet she stood there, and her eyes met his as if she could see everything he was trying to hide. The girl stood there in the church's flickering candlelight, and Marcus couldn't look away. 27 years old, thin but not fragile. There was something in the way she held herself, the way she moved, a quiet strength he couldn't explain. Her chestnut brown hair fell to her shoulders, slightly mussed but clean. Her blue-gray eyes, the color of a sky before a storm, looked out at the world with a strange calm. The clothes she wore were old, frayed in a few places, but freshly washed and neatly folded. She wasn't beautiful in the way Marcus was used to in his world, women dripping in expensive jewelry and designer dresses. Yet there was something about her that drew the eye, something that made you look twice. After that brief moment of eye contact, she turned back to her work. Marcus stood there watching her hand out food to the homeless, and he realized she knew every single one of them by name. Mr. Miller, are you feeling better today? Is your hand still hurting? She asked an elderly man who trembled as he held his tray. The old man smiled with toothless warmth. Much better, Ivy. Thanks to the medicine you gave me the other day. She nodded, her smile gentle. Make sure you take it the way you're supposed to. And don't sleep outside anymore. The church is warmer. Then she turned to the next person, a young woman holding a baby. Sarah, has little Tommy's cough gotten any better? I saved extra milk for him. The woman accepted the food, eyes filling with tears. Thank you, Ivy. Thank you so much. Sister Catherine stood beside Marcus, watching the girl with the gaze of a mother watching her child. She spoke, her voice low and heavy with feeling. I found her 5 years ago, half dead in the alley behind this church. She was lying there, barely breathing, her body covered in injuries. She paused and drew a deep breath, as if the memory still hurt. Bad people kept her captive from the time she was little. For years, Mr. Ashford. Years in a hell I can't even bear to imagine. Marcus felt something clamp tight in his chest. He'd done terrible things in his life. But hearing this still made his skin crawl. She escaped. How? I never asked, because I knew the answer would be painful beyond words. When I found her, she was almost gone. I didn't think she'd survive that night. Sister Catherine looked toward Ivy, her eyes shining. But she lived. And what amazed me wasn't that she survived. She turned back to Marcus. It's that she doesn't hate. After everything that happened, after the hell she endured, she still believes in people. She can still smile, still love, still see goodness in this world. Marcus watched the girl laughing softly with the homeless, and he couldn't understand. How was it possible? How could someone live through that and not break? Sister Catherine seemed to read his thoughts. Ivy sees what other people don't. She has a special gift. There was reverence in the way she spoke. Once, a family came here asking for food, parents and a child. Everyone else saw them as normal. But Ivy looked at the child for only a few seconds and pulled me aside. She said the child was being abused. I asked how she knew. She said she could tell by the way the child held the spoon, the way the child flinched every time the father lifted a hand. the way the child looked down whenever anyone asked a question. Marcus said nothing. We called the police, and Ivy was right. The child had been abused for years. Sister Catherine let out a slow breath. She can also tell when someone is lying just by their breathing. She sees the pain people hide, the fear they bury deep. Nothing can fool her eyes. Marcus asked, his voice rough. How can she do that? Sister Catherine looked at him, her gaze deep as the sea. During the years she was held, she had to learn to read every smallest sign to survive. To know when her captors were angry so she could avoid them. To know when danger was coming so she could run. To know who could be trusted and who couldn't. She paused. Pain became her gift, Mr. Ashford. What nearly killed her became the very thing that helps her save other people. Marcus was about to speak when the girl walked over. She had finished handing out the food, and now she stood in front of him, without the slightest hesitation. Her blue-gray eyes met his directly, and Marcus felt as if she were looking through every mask he'd worn for years. You're suffering beyond measure, she said, her voice gentle but certain. I can see it in your eyes, in the way you stand, in every breath you take. Marcus went still. All his life, no one had dared meet his gaze like that. No one had dared speak to him that way. Yet this girl stood there, thin in her worn clothes, and spoke to the most powerful mafia boss in New York, as if he were simply a man who needed help. Do you want to tell me about it? She asked. Marcus looked at her, into those blue-gray eyes, and he saw what he hadn't found in any doctor, any specialist. Peace. She had nothing. No money, no power, no status. Yet she had what he'd lost long ago, a quiet steadiness of the soul. My son is dying, Marcus said, his voice breaking. 12 years old, lying in a hospital with wires all over him, and no one knows why. No one can save him. Ivy nodded, her eyes softening. And Marcus told her. For the first time in his life, he opened his heart to a stranger. Not to a doctor, not to a lawyer, not to anyone from his world, but to a homeless girl in this weathered old church. They sat on a pew in the corner, and Marcus began to talk about Elliot. His voice trembled, no longer the voice of a powerful boss that all of New York feared, only the voice of a father slowly losing his only child. He's nothing like me, Marcus said, eyes distant, as if he could see his son's face again. He's kind, innocent, always thinking of other people before he thinks of himself. He doesn't know what I do. He doesn't know who his father is outside that house. He stopped, swallowing hard. He only knows I'm his dad. And he loves me, even though I don't deserve that love. Ivy listened without interrupting, without judging. She just sat there, blue-gray eyes on Marcus with complete attention. When he finished, she didn't offer the empty comforts other people always did. Instead, she began to ask questions. Before he collapsed, did Elliot change at all? Eating habits, sleep, mood? Marcus frowned, trying to remember. I'm not sure. Maybe he was a little more tired than usual, but I thought that was just school. Ivy nodded. Who's around him the most? At school? At home? Anywhere? Marcus thought. At home there's me, the house staff, the nanny. At school. He stopped. I don't know much about school. I've been too busy, Ivy continued. Has anyone new come into his life lately? A new friend? A new teacher? Anyone at all? Marcus shook his head, then hesitated. I really don't know. He looked at Ivy, and there was surprise in his eyes. 12 doctors had examined Elliot. 12 top specialists in the world with the highest credentials, the most advanced equipment, the deepest experience. Yet none of them had asked these questions. They asked about symptoms, medical history, genetics, but no one asked about Elliot's life, about the people around him, about the small changes only family might notice. Ivy looked straight into Marcus's eyes and asked the question no one else would dare ask. Does anyone hate you enough to hurt your son? Marcus went rigid. The question struck like a knife, driven straight into his chest. In his world, the answer was far too clear. How many people had he crushed to climb to the top of power? How many allies had he betrayed? How many enemies had he created? Yes, he said, his voice strangled. A lot of people. Ivy nodded, not surprised. She was quiet for a moment, as if arranging her thoughts. Then she said, I want to meet him. Marcus stared at her as if she had just said something insane. You're not a doctor. You don't have a degree. You don't have equipment. You don't have anything. You think you can do what 12 top specialists in the world couldn't? Ivy didn't flinch. 12 doctors failed. That's what you're saying. They have everything. Degrees, equipment, knowledge. And they still couldn't find the problem. She tilted her head. Maybe this isn't a problem that needs a doctor. Maybe it needs someone to look from a different angle. Marcus wanted to refuse. Every piece of logic in his head told him this was madness. Bring a homeless girl into a hospital to look at his son. The doctors would think he'd lost his mind. But then Sister Catherine stepped closer and laid a hand on Marcus's shoulder. Trust her, Mr. Ashford. I've seen Ivy see what no one else can see. Many times. She has a gift science can't explain. Marcus looked at Sister Catherine, then at Ivy. The thin girl with the blue-gray eyes stood there, waiting for his answer. Not pleading, not persuading, just waiting. He'd tried everything. Every doctor. Every medicine. Every modern machine. And all of it had failed. What did he have left to lose? All right, Marcus said, his voice tired. But if you waste my time... Ivy smiled, gentle but not weak. I don't have anything to waste, Mr. Ashford. I don't have money. I don't have a home. I don't have a family. The only thing I have is time, and I'm willing to spend it to help you. Marcus stood, and Ivy rose with him. They walked out of the church, where Marcus's black car was still waiting. Leo stood beside it, and when he saw his boss step out with a girl in shabby clothes, his face showed open surprise. But he didn't ask. 15 years with Marcus had taught him when to stay silent. Ivy climbed into the car, sat down on the expensive leather seat, and she didn't look overwhelmed or hesitant. She sat as if it were the most normal thing in the world. A homeless girl sitting beside the most powerful mafia boss on America's East Coast. Sister Catherine stood in the church doorway watching them. As Marcus was about to close the car door, she called out, "Mr. Ashford." He turned back to her. "Bring her home safely. She's our miracle." Marcus nodded, then closed the door. The car rolled away, leaving St. Michael's Church behind, carrying two people from two completely different worlds, a desperate mafia boss and an invisible girl carrying his last hope. When the car stopped in front of the most luxurious private hospital in New York, Ivy stepped out and looked up at the glass bright skyscraper towering above her. This was a world completely different from St. Michael's Church, where she had lived for 5 years. But she didn't look overwhelmed. She simply followed Marcus inside, her steps steady, her gaze calm. The moment they entered the hallway leading to Elliot's room, eyes began to turn toward Ivy. Nurses whispered to one another. Doctors frowned when they saw her. An older doctor with silver hair, the one overseeing Elliot's case, walked up to Marcus with contempt he didn't bother to hide. "Mr. Ashford, why are you bringing a beggar into the hospital? This is a sterile area. We have strict rules about who comes and goes." Marcus looked at him with eyes as cold as ice, the look that made anyone who truly knew him tremble. "She's here by my invitation, and if you have a problem with that, you can pack your things and leave right now." The doctor swallowed, stepped back, and didn't dare say another word. Marcus led Ivy into Elliot's room. The boy lay there, small and fragile among the machines and the tangle of tubes. Ivy said nothing. She only stood beside the bed, studying Elliot with fierce concentration. She watched the way he breathed, the way the machines worked, the way the light fell across his gray, exhausted face. An hour passed. 2 hours. Ivy still stood there, silent as a statue. Marcus sat in the corner, watching her with a mix of doubt and hope. He didn't understand what she was doing, but he chose to wait. At last, Ivy spoke. "I need to see his medical chart, his meal plan for the past month, and a list of everyone who's visited." Marcus nodded and had a nurse bring what Ivy asked for. Ivy sat in the chair beside the bed, turned the pages one by one, and read every line. Her blue-gray eyes moved quickly, yet missed nothing. Then she stopped on a page. Her finger pointed to a name on the visitor list. "Who is W. Crane?" Marcus stepped closer and looked at the page. He frowned. "I don't know anyone named Crane. Maybe it's one of Elliot's classmates." Ivy shook her head. "This person visited Elliot 3 times. All of them in the week before your son got sick." She looked up at Marcus. "You said 12 doctors examined him. Did any of them ask about this person?" Marcus was silent. The answer was no. He took out his phone and called Leo. "Check the hospital security footage. Find every time someone signed in as W. Crane to visit Elliot. I need to know who it is." 30 minutes later, Leo called back. His voice was tight through the phone. "Boss, I found him. W. Crane is a teenager, around 14. And his full name is Derek Crane." Marcus felt the blood in his veins turn to ice. "Crane, whose son is he?" Leo was quiet for a moment before he answered. "Victor Crane's son, boss." Marcus didn't speak. He just stood there with the phone still against his ear, but he couldn't hear anything anymore. "Victor Crane, The name reached out like a ghost from the past and wrapped itself around his throat. At that moment, the door opened. Leo walked in, holding a small box wrapped in black paper. His face was drained white. "Boss, someone sent this. They said it had to be put in your hands." Marcus took the box and opened it. Inside were 2 photographs and a slip of paper. The first photo showed Elliot at school, laughing with his friends, taken from far away, as if whoever took it had been watching him. The second photo showed Marcus sitting beside his son's hospital bed, taken through the glass from outside the room, and the slip of paper held handwriting Marcus recognized instantly. "I waited 10 years. Now you know what it feels like to watch the thing you love most about to be taken. This is only the beginning. Signed V. C." Marcus crushed the note in his fist, his knuckles bone white from the force of his grip. His face went pale, and Ivy could see fury blazing in his eyes like hellfire. "Who is V. C.?" she asked, her voice calm. Marcus bared his teeth, his words cutting through clenched jaws. "Victor Crane, the man I once thought was dead." He turned to the window, fists clenched. 10 years ago, we were partners. We built an empire from nothing together. But then, he stopped, swallowing hard. Then I betrayed him. I gave his secrets to the police to save myself. He went to prison for 5 years, lost everything. His wife left. His son had to live in an orphanage. Marcus turned back to Ivy. When he got out, he swore he'd take revenge. Then he vanished. I thought he was dead, or he'd given up. Turns out I was wrong. Ivy looked at Marcus, then down at Elliot lying there dying in the bed. "You think he's targeting Elliot?" Marcus nodded, bitterness thick in his voice. "He wants me to hurt the way he hurt. He wants me to watch the thing I love most, slipping away, and be unable to do anything." His hands curled so tightly his nails bit into his skin. "I'm going to kill him. I'll find him and I'll kill him with my own hands." But Ivy stepped in front of Marcus, blocking his path. "Save your son first. Revenge later." Marcus stared at her as if she'd said something insane. "You don't understand. He's hurting my son. I have to. If you kill Victor now." Ivy cut in, her voice calm but sharp. "Your son will still die. You don't know what he did to Elliot. You don't know how to save him. Killing Victor won't change that." Marcus stood there, breathing heavy, fury still rolling in his chest. But he knew she was right. He hated admitting it, but she was right. "Then what do we do?" he asked, like a drowning man clinging to the last piece of driftwood. Ivy looked at him, then at the photo of Elliot at school. "Find out what he did. Start with Derek." The next morning, Ivy stood at the gates of Westbrook Academy, the most prestigious private school in New York, reserved for the children of the city's most powerful families. She wore clothes Marcus had ordered in a rush, respectable enough that she wouldn't be turned away, but not so expensive that she would draw attention. In her hand was a fake volunteer badge Leo had arranged overnight. She walked into the school with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged there. No one questioned her. She was just a new volunteer, there to support the school's health program. Ivy went straight to the nurse's office, where a middle-aged nurse was sorting files. Ivy knocked and stepped in with a friendly smile. "Hi, I'm the new volunteer. They told me to come here to learn about the school's health programs." The nurse looked up and smiled. "Oh, hello. Have a seat. We've got quite a few programs running." Ivy sat down, her eyes sweeping over the file cabinets and shelves of medicine around the room. "I heard the school has a vitamin program for students, right? That sounds wonderful." The nurse nodded, pride in her expression. "Yes. It's a sponsored program from Crane Pharmaceuticals. They provide free vitamins for a few selected students. It's very good for their health." Ivy kept her voice steady, though her heart was beating faster. "Crane Pharmaceuticals? That sounds familiar. Are there many students in it?" The nurse flipped through a folder. "Not many. Only 5 students. It's a pilot program. They said they'll expand it if it's successful." 5 students? Are they doing well? Are the vitamins helping?" The nurse fell suddenly quiet, worry flashing across her face. "Actually, it's strange. 2 of those 5 are in the hospital, and the third one, Elliot Ashford, he's very serious too. I don't understand why." Something cold ran down Ivy's spine. 3 out of 5 children taking those vitamins were dangerously ill. That wasn't coincidence. "Could you show me the list of the 5? I want to. Send well wishes to the ones who are hospitalized." The nurse hesitated, but then handed Ivy the list. 5 names. 3 of them in the hospital with similar symptoms. And all of them had started taking vitamins from Crane Pharmaceuticals about 2 months earlier. Ivy thanked the nurse and left. But she didn't leave the school right away. She walked around the yard, watching the students during recess. She was searching for one face, the face she had seen in the hospital security footage, and she found him. Derek Crane sat alone on a stone bench in the corner, apart from the other students. He was about 14, thin, with eyes full of darkness. He didn't play with anyone, didn't speak to anyone. He just sat there staring at the ground as if he were carrying a burden far too heavy for his age. Ivy asked a teacher nearby, "Derek Crane? He has trouble fitting in. He used to bully other kids, especially Elliot Ashford. But strangely, lately they've seemed closer. Derek has been bringing Elliot food and drinks. I thought he was trying to be friends." Ivy listened, and every piece began to fall into place. Derek, Victor Crane's son, vitamins from Crane Pharmaceuticals, 3 children fading fast, Derek suddenly acting friendly toward Elliot, bringing him drinks. It wasn't vitamins, it was poison. Ivy went back to the hospital immediately and told Marcus everything. He stood there, listening to every word, and she could see fury rising in him like molten lava about to erupt. When Ivy finished, Marcus punched the wall, hard enough to leave blood on the white paint. "He used his son to poison my child. That Derek boy, Derek is a child." Ivy cut him off, her voice calm but firm. 14. Maybe he doesn't even know what he's doing. Marcus turned on her, eyes blazing red. "You're defending the one who hurt my son?" Ivy didn't step back. She looked straight into the mafia boss's eyes without an ounce of fear. "I'm not defending anyone. I'm telling you the truth." She paused and took a deep breath. "I was used by adults, Mr. Ashford. The people who held me forced me to do things I didn't want to do. I know what that feels like, being pressured, being threatened, being turned into a tool for someone else's crimes." Her voice softened. "Derek lives with Victor Crane, a father consumed by hatred, who spent 15 years planning revenge. Do you really think a child growing up in that kind of place has any other choice?" Marcus was silent. The anger was still there, but something else moved in with it. Maybe understanding, maybe his own pain. Thinking of Elliot, thinking of how he had tried to keep his son safe from the dark world he lived in. "So what do you want to do?" he asked, his voice a little softer now. "Let me talk to Derek." "Alone." Marcus shook his head immediately. "No, it's too dangerous. Victor could have someone watching the boy. If you or your people show up, Derek will be terrified, and he won't say anything. But with me..." Ivy looked at him. "I know how to talk to kids who are afraid. I used to be one of them." Marcus looked at her, the conflict written plainly across his face. At last he let out a long breath. "Fine. But Leo will stay close, in case anything happens." Ivy nodded, agreed. She walked out of the hospital room, preparing for the meeting that might decide Elliot's fate, and perhaps Derek's too. Another child held in darkness, only in a different way. That afternoon, Ivy found Derek in the small park near the school, the place where he often sat alone after classes. He was on a stone bench, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on nothing. 14 years old, so thin his shoulder blades stood out beneath his uniform. His eyes were full of darkness, as if he'd seen far too much of what a child was never meant to see. When Ivy came closer, Derek looked up. His face changed instantly, from exhausted to hostile in a heartbeat. It was the reflex of a child who had learned to protect himself by wearing something frightening. "Who are you? What do you want?" he demanded, his voice a low growl, like a small animal cornered. Ivy didn't step back. She sat on the bench, leaving enough space not to threaten him, but close enough that he would know she wasn't afraid. "I want to talk about Elliot." Derek tensed, his whole body ready to bolt at any second. "I don't know anything about him. Go away." Ivy looked at him, and she saw herself in those fear-filled eyes. She saw the child she had once been. The child who had been locked away and forced to do things she didn't want to do. The child carrying an adult's burden on small shoulders. "I'm not saying you know anything," she said gently. "I'm saying you were forced." Derek froze. The hostility drained from his face, replaced by naked fear. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. "I know what that feels like," Ivy continued, her voice light as wind. "Being made by adults to do things you don't want to do. Being threatened, being so afraid you can't say no." She held Derek's gaze. "I've been there. I understand." A long silence. Wind moved through the trees. Distant traffic whispered somewhere beyond the park. Then Derek lowered his head, and his shoulders began to shake. A sob broke free. Not the cry of a bully or a bad kid, but the cry of a soul carrying too much. "My dad made me do it," he said through the sobs. "He said if I didn't, he would." He couldn't finish, his throat closing. Ivy said nothing, only waited. Sometimes silence was the only thing a person needed. He said he'd leave me. Derek's voice cracked, like my mom did. Derek looked up, tears streaming down his cheeks. My mom left when my dad went to prison. She didn't want me. Nobody wanted me. Only my dad. He wiped at his face with his sleeve, but the tears wouldn't stop. I know my dad does bad things. I know he's scary, but he's the only person I have left. If he leaves me, I'll have no one. Ivy felt a sharp ache in her chest. She looked at Derek and saw a child trapped, used by the one person who was supposed to protect him. Victor Crane had taken his son's fear of abandonment and turned it into a weapon. My dad gave me pills, Derek confessed, his voice trembling. He told me to give them to Elliot every day. He said they were just vitamins, that they'd only make Elliot a little sick, just enough to scare Elliot's dad. He looked at Ivy, horror in his eyes. He said it was just a joke, that nobody would get hurt. I believed him. His voice broke. Is Elliot going to die? Because of me, because of those pills. Ivy reached out and took Derek's freezing hand. The boy flinched as if to pull away, but then he stopped. Maybe it had been too long since anyone had touched him with gentleness. It's not your fault, Ivy said, her voice steady. You were used. You were lied to by the person who was supposed to protect you. Your father is the one at fault, not you. Derek cried harder, his whole body shaking. Ivy stayed there holding his hand, letting him cry until he had no tears left. When Derek had calmed a little, Ivy asked, Do you know what the pills do? Did your dad say anything about them? Derek nodded, eyes still red. I heard my dad on the phone once. He said the drug would build up in the body. It would make something in the throat, block the airway slowly. Derek swallowed. He said it kills people slowly, so they have to watch someone they love die little by little and never know why. Ivy felt icy cold run along her spine. Victor Crane didn't just want to kill Elliot. He wanted Marcus to watch his son die day by day, helpless, ignorant of the cause, with no way to stop it. It was the cruelest revenge she could imagine. Derek, Ivy said, tightening her grip on the boy's hand. Do you want to make this right? Derek looked up at her, fear still there, but something else too, a fragile hope. Make it right. But how? I already hurt Elliot. Elliot is still alive, Ivy cut in. And you can help save him, by telling the truth. Derek hesitated. But, Mr. Ashford will kill me. He's the man everyone's afraid of, my dad said. Mr. Ashford is a desperate father trying to save his son, Ivy said. Just like you're a desperate kid trying to be loved. Do you think he won't understand? Silence. Derek looked at Ivy, then down at the hand holding his, warm and gentle, without judgment. I'll do anything, he said at last, voice small but determined. If it can save Elliot, I'll do it, even if Mr. Ashford kills me after. Ivy stood, still holding Derek's hand. Then come with me. You need to tell Mr. Ashford the truth. Ivy brought Derek to the hospital, and when the boy stepped into Elliot's room, Marcus was standing beside his son's bed. He turned, and the moment he saw Derek, his eyes darkened like a sky before a storm. For a heartbeat, Ivy saw the real Mafia king, not the grieving father she'd witnessed these past days. Marcus moved toward Derek, fists clenched, and the boy shrank back, trembling like a leaf in the wind. But Ivy stepped between them and blocked Marcus's path. Hear him first, she said, calm but unyielding. Marcus looked at her as if she'd betrayed him. He poisoned my son. And do you want to know how to save Elliot? Or do you want to kill him first and let your son die afterward? Ivy asked, plain and sharp. The question hit Marcus like cold water. He stopped, breathing heavy, eyes still bloodshot, but he didn't take another step. Derek stood there with tears streaming down his cheeks, and he began to talk. He told them about the pills his father had given him, about the lie that it was only a joke, about the perfect revenge Victor had nursed for 15 years in prison. He told them how Victor wanted Marcus to watch his son die day by day without knowing why, unable to do anything. It was payback for what Marcus had done 15 years earlier. When Derek finished, the room fell into silence. Marcus stood there, looking at a 14-year-old boy sobbing, and he remembered what Ivy had said, that the boy was a victim too. He looked at Derek and saw a child used by his own father, and it echoed the way Marcus had tried to keep Elliot from the darkness of his world. Only Derek hadn't been as lucky as Elliot. That boy had had no one to protect him. I'll deal with your father later, Marcus said, his voice still cold but no longer murderous. Right now, we save my son first. Ivy let out a quiet breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She led Derek out, placed him in Leo's care, then returned to Elliot's room to plan the next step with Marcus. But when she left the hospital to take Derek back to the church so Sister Catherine could look after him, she felt that something was wrong. The survival instinct from her years in darkness taught her how to recognize danger. Night had fallen, the street was thinly traveled, and behind her a black car was crawling along, following. Ivy didn't turn around, and she didn't run. She kept walking, but her eyes tracked everything around her. The car drew closer, and she could feel the threat rolling off it. Suddenly, another vehicle shot out from the corner and cut between Ivy and the black car. Leo jumped out, placing himself between her and whatever was coming. The black car paused for a second, as if weighing its options. Then it turned and vanished into the dark. Marcus opened the door of the car. "Get in. Now." Ivy looked at him steadily. "I'm not afraid of them." Marcus met her eyes, and his voice changed. "No ice, no command, only something raw and real. I know, but I am." Ivy looked into his face, and for the first time she saw something else there. Not fear for himself, but fear for her. She got in. Marcus sat beside her, and as the car moved, he said, "Victor knows you're helping me. He won't leave you alone." Ivy watched the streetlights slide past the window like streaks of pale fire. "Then we have to be faster than him." Back at the hospital, Ivy laid out everything she'd learned. The poison has been building up in Elliot's body and crystallized into a small mass in his throat. It's sitting where the throat curves, where the scope can't see. The chief doctor stood there with open contempt. "You don't have a medical degree. Don't lecture me about medicine. We've checked his throat dozens of times." Marcus stepped forward until he was close enough that the doctor had to look up at him. "Check again. Right now." Exactly where she said. The doctor swallowed, then grudgingly called for the equipment. They examined Elliot's throat again, this time focusing on the precise spot Ivy had indicated. Then the doctor went pale, staring at the monitor. "There is something here. A small mass. We missed it." Marcus turned to Ivy, and gratitude filled his eyes, the kind he couldn't put into words. But then the doctor shook his head. "This location is too dangerous. Surgery could cause serious damage. And our instruments are too large. We can't reach it without hurting the boy." A heavy silence settled over the room. They'd found the problem, and still they couldn't fix it. Ivy looked at Elliot on the bed, then down at her own hands. Small hands, long fingers, hands she'd once used to survive in hell. "Let me try," she said. Marcus and the doctors turned to her as if she'd lost her mind. "I have small hands, flexible fingers. I can reach where you can't." Marcus stepped close. "Are you sure?" Ivy looked at him, then at Elliot. A 12-year-old with clear eyes, the child who'd seen her when no one else had, the child who'd asked his father why anyone had to sleep on the street. "No," she answered honestly. "I'm not sure, but I'm going to try." She turned to the nearest nurse. "Give me a pair of sterile gloves, smallest size you have." The nurse hesitated, then handed them over. Ivy snapped the latex gloves onto her hands and moved to Elliot's bedside, preparing to do what no one in that room believed was possible. Ivy stood beside Elliot's bed, looking at a 12-year-old boy who was slipping away. His face was gray, his lips drained of color, and every breath was a battle he was slowly losing. And in that moment, Ivy no longer saw Elliot. She saw herself, 5 years earlier, dying in the dark alley behind St. Michael's Church. She remembered the cold of the ground beneath her back, remembered the feeling of life leaving her body bit by bit, remembered the despair of thinking she would die there and no one would ever know. I was invisible. The whole world forgot me. I lay there waiting to die, and no one stopped to look. But then someone did. Sister Catherine, the woman with eyes bright as stars and a heart as wide as the sea, found her in that darkness. She hadn't walked past like everyone else. She had stopped, bent down, and spoken words Ivy would remember forever. "You're not invisible. I see you." And Sister Catherine saved her. Not just her life, but the shattered soul inside it. "Now it's my turn." Ivy drew a deep breath and pushed every thought aside. She focused on Elliot, on the boy who needed her. She tilted her head and studied his throat with the fierce concentration she had learned in those years of darkness, when reading the smallest signs meant the difference between living and dying. The doctor had confirmed there was a small mass exactly where she had indicated, but they couldn't reach it. The tools were too large, the location too dangerous. They had given up. But Ivy didn't. She looked at Marcus, the most powerful man in New York, standing there with eyes red from grief and the face of a man about to lose everything. "Trust me," she said, calm and certain. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. That was all Ivy needed. She reached in, her gloved fingers small and flexible, moving carefully into Elliot's throat. She closed her eyes, relying not on sight but on touch, on instinct she had sharpened over years. Through the thin layer of latex, her fingertips searched, feeling their way, inch by inch. And then she touched something, a small, hard mass that didn't belong there. She tightened her grip gently and pulled, slowly, carefully, making sure not to hurt the boy. When she drew her hand back, held securely between her gloved fingers, was a small, dull gray lump, the poison, crystallized, the thing that had almost killed Elliot. Every doctor in the room stared, mouths open, unable to believe what they were seeing. And then the miracle happened. Elliot began to breathe. His chest rose and fell, no longer struggling the way it had been. The monitor started to steady, the numbers settling, drifting back toward normal. The steady beeping sounded like music from heaven. Marcus collapsed. He fell to his knees beside his son's bed, tears streaming down his face. The most powerful mafia boss on America's East Coast cried like a child, clutching his son's hand as if he let go, the boy would disappear. My son, he whispered, his voice breaking. Elliot's eyes fluttered open. Those clear eyes lifted to his father, then moved to Ivy standing beside the bed. Dad, who is that? He asked, weak but awake. Marcus squeezed his hand tighter, tears still falling. She's the one who saved you. The one you saw at the church. Elliot looked at Ivy, and a tired but warm smile touched his lips. I knew she was special. From the first time I saw her. Ivy smiled, and for the first time in a very long time, she felt she mattered. She had saved a life. She wasn't invisible anymore. Marcus rose and turned to Ivy. In his eyes was a depth of gratitude no words could hold. I owe you a life. Anything you want, I'll do it. Ivy shook her head. You don't owe me anything. I only did what someone once did for me. She paused, looking toward the window. But someone needs to pay for what happened. Marcus followed her gaze, and his face went cold. His eyes became the eyes of the Mafia king again, ice cold and without mercy. Victor Crane. Marcus left the hospital that very night. He called Leo, his voice cold as steel. Find Victor Crane. I know he's somewhere in this city. Leo was silent for a moment before he asked, How many men do I bring, boss? Marcus looked out the car window, where New York's nightlights slid past like blurred streaks. No one. I'm going alone. Leo wanted to argue, but he knew when not to defy his boss. 30 minutes later, Leo called back with an address, an abandoned warehouse at the southern docks of Manhattan. Marcus was about to step out of the hospital when Ivy blocked his path. She stood there, blue-gray eyes fixed on him, worry plain on her face. You're going to kill him? Marcus didn't answer, but his silence was answer enough. Ivy stepped closer. He almost killed my son, Marcus said, his words cutting like a blade. He used his son to poison Elliot. He wanted me to watch my child die day by day and be able to do nothing. What do you think I should do? Forgive him? Ivy didn't back down. And if you kill him, you'll become like him. You'll become the thing your son doesn't want to see. That stopped Marcus. He remembered that morning, 3 weeks earlier, when Elliot sat at the breakfast table and asked why people had to sleep on the street. He remembered his son's clear eyes when he asked, Why can't we share? Elliot didn't know who his father was. He didn't know what his father had done, and Marcus wanted it to stay that way. But if he killed Victor Crane tonight, would he still be the father Elliot loved? Or would he become the monster he'd always tried to hide? So what do you want me to do? He asked, his voice worn down. Ivy looked at him, her gaze softening. I want you to do the right thing, even if I don't know what that is. Marcus looked at her for a long time, then said nothing as he walked out and got into the car. The abandoned warehouse sat at the end of the docks, where rusted shipping containers were stacked like enormous tombs. Marcus walked in alone. No weapon, no protection, only himself and the dark. Victor Crane was already waiting inside. He stood in the middle of the warehouse, weak light from above casting strange shadows across his face. 15 years of prison and 10 years of planning revenge had turned him into someone completely different from the partner Marcus once knew. So you finally came, Victor said, his voice cold as ice. I thought you'd send someone to kill me. Didn't expect you to have the guts to face me. Marcus moved closer and stopped a few steps away. How's your son? Still alive? Victor asked, a vicious smile on his mouth. Marcus stared at him without blinking. He's alive. Not because of you. Victor gave a hard, bitter laugh. Too bad. I was hoping you'd have to bury him, so you'd know what it feels like to lose everything the way I did. Then he pulled a gun from inside his coat and aimed it straight at Marcus. The black barrel pointed at the mafia boss's chest, and in the dim light, Marcus could see Victor's hand trembling slightly. "I've waited 10 years for this moment," Victor said, his voice shaking with emotion. 5 years in prison, 5 years in the shadows. I only thought about one thing, watching you die. Marcus didn't move. He didn't run, didn't dodge, didn't beg. He just stood there, meeting his enemy's eyes. Then shoot. Victor froze, not expecting Marcus to react that way. "You're not afraid to die?" Marcus drew a deep breath. "I am, but I'm afraid of something else more." "What?" "I'm afraid my son will grow up without a father, but I'm even more afraid he'll grow up and learn his father is a monster." Marcus paused, his voice dropping lower. "You want me dead? Fine. But before you pull the trigger, think about Derek." Victor flinched like he'd been shocked. "Don't you talk about my son." Marcus didn't stop. "Derek needs his father too, the way my son needs me. But he needs a father, not a killer." Marcus stepped closer, unafraid of the gun aimed at him. "If you shoot me today, you'll go back to prison. And Derek will lose his father for real. Not because you're locked up, but because you've become something that can't be loved." Victor's hand shook harder, the gun wavering. "You don't know anything about me and Derek." "I know," he cried when he told a homeless girl he didn't want to hurt Elliot, Marcus said, and his voice softened in a way that surprised even him. "He was forced. By you. By the person he loves most in the world." Marcus looked straight into Victor's eyes. "You've hated me for 15 years, and what did it get you? Your son looks at you like you're a monster. What did you gain? What did you gain except loneliness and hate?" The gun lowered. Slowly, Victor stood there, trembling, and Marcus saw something he never expected. Tears. Tears running down his enemy's face. 10 years, Victor whispered, his voice breaking. "I spent 10 years hating you, and what did it give me?" He looked down at the gun in his hand, shaking. "I lost my wife, lost my freedom, and now I'm losing my son too." Marcus stepped closer. "I'm a monster too. I know it. I've done terrible things, even to you." He stopped. "But I'm trying to change. A homeless girl taught me that someone who's been through hell can still choose not to hate. She was held for years, tortured, treated like she wasn't even human, and she still doesn't hate." Marcus looked at Victor. "If she can do it, why can't we?" A long silence. Victor stood there looking at Marcus, looking at the gun, then staring into nothing. He was fighting himself, fighting the 15 years of hatred that had eaten through his soul. Then he threw the gun to the ground. Metal struck concrete and the sound echoed through the empty warehouse. "Get out," Victor said, his voice exhausted. "Get out before I change my mind." Marcus turned and walked toward the door, but before he reached the outside, Victor's voice rose behind him, trembling and broken. "I'm sorry, about your son." Marcus stopped but didn't turn back. "Tell Derek, he needs to hear it more than I do." Then he walked out, leaving Victor Crane alone in the dark with the wreckage of 15 years of hate. 3 months later, spring had arrived, and New York was flooded with warm sunlight, as if the whole city were coming back to life. Elliot had recovered completely. The 12-year-old boy with clear eyes was running again, laughing again, asking his father 1,000 questions about the world the way he used to. But something in him had changed. He was no longer only an innocent child. He had seen death, had felt it draw near, and it made him value life more than ever. Every weekend, Elliot went to St. Michael's Church with Ivy. He helped her hand out food to the homeless, memorized every name, and listened to their stories with a kind of attention few children ever had. Ivy and Elliot had become close friends, a strange friendship between a 27-year-old woman who had lived through hell and a 12-year-old boy born into luxury, yet they understood each other in a way no one else could. Marcus had changed too. The most powerful mafia boss on America's East Coast had walked away from the underworld. It was a decision no one thought he would ever make, but he did. He handed everything over to Leo, the trusted bodyguard who had stood by him for 15 years. When Leo stood in Marcus's office, receiving everything his boss had built, he couldn't hide his shock. "Boss, are you sure? That's 15 years of building. That's everything you have." Marcus looked out the window, where Elliot was playing in the yard with a radiant smile. "I almost lost my son because of what I've done, Leo. The enemies I made, the sins I committed, they nearly killed the only child I have." He turned back to Leo. "I don't want to lose him for real, and I don't want him to grow up and one day find out who his father is." Victor Crane had left New York. After the night he faced Marcus in the warehouse, he packed up everything and disappeared. But before he went, he did something no one expected. He met with Derek and told his son he was sorry, that he had been wrong to use the boy as a tool for revenge. He told Derek he deserved a better life, far from the darkness Victor had created. Then he left Derek behind, under Marcus Ashford's protection, a decision 15 years of hatred would never have allowed him to make. But one night facing the truth changed everything. Derek stayed in New York, and Marcus arranged a place for him to live, a new school, a chance to start over. The 14-year-old with eyes full of darkness was slowly learning how to live without fear. But there was one thing he feared more than anything, seeing Elliot again. At first, Elliot didn't want to meet Derek. The boy knew Derek was the one who had given him the poison, whether by accident or on purpose. But Ivy told Elliot what she had told Marcus before. He's a victim too, Elliot. His father used him, threatened him, forced him. He's just a kid who wanted his father to love him. Elliot thought for a long time, and then he finally agreed to meet Derek. They met at St. Michael's Church, with Ivy and Sister Catherine there to witness it. Derek stood with his head down, unable to look Elliot in the eye. He waited for anger, for hatred, for punishment. But Elliot stepped forward, and the boy said something Derek never imagined he would ever hear. "I don't hate you. I just don't want you to be sad anymore." Derek lifted his head, tears streaming down his face. It was the first time in his life anyone had forgiven him. The first time anyone looked at him not as someone guilty, but as a child who needed to be loved. Marcus wanted to give Ivy money, a home, anything she wanted. But Ivy refused it all. "I don't need money, Mr. Ashford. I don't need a big house or a beautiful car. I need purpose." She looked out the window, where homeless people were lining up to receive food at the church. "I want to help people like me, people no one sees, people the world forgets." Elliot sat nearby listening, and suddenly his eyes lit up. "Dad, why don't we build a place for them? A place that's really big and really beautiful, where they can live and be cared for?" Marcus looked at his son, then at Ivy, and he smiled. The first smile in a long time that carried no shadow. "All right, we'll build it." When Sister Catherine heard, she cried. Tears ran down her wrinkled face, but they were tears of joy. "For 32 years I've prayed for this," she said, her voice trembling. "For 32 years I've hoped someone would see the invisible people." Ivy hugged her, the woman who had saved her 5 years earlier, the woman who had given her a reason to live. "Your prayer has been answered." When they talked about building the new center, Marcus asked, "What will it be called?" Elliot didn't hesitate. "The Ivy Center. Name it after Ivy." But Ivy shook her head with a smile. "No, name it the place where everyone is seen." Sister Catherine, who had listened in silence, finally spoke. Her voice was gentle, but certain, as if she had carried this name in her heart for 32 years. The Center for the Invisible. They looked at one another, and they knew it was the perfect name. 6 months later, on an autumn morning, drenched in golden sunlight, the Center for the Invisible officially opened its doors. The building rose solidly in an old Manhattan neighborhood, not far from St. Michael's Church, like a promise kept in full. This was not just a shelter. It was a true home. Clean beds with warm blankets, classrooms with books and computers, a clinic with doctors and nurses on duty, a children's play garden with swings and slides. Hundreds of people who had once lived on the streets now had a roof, a place to call home. Sister Catherine stood at the podium, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. She looked down at the crowd below, faces that had once carried only despair now bright with joy. "For 32 years, I have been here," she began, her voice trembling with emotion. "For 32 years, I have watched thousands of people come and go. They arrived with empty hands and broken hearts. They left not knowing whether they would still be alive tomorrow." She paused and took a deep breath. "But today, they are not invisible anymore. Today, everyone sees them." Sister Catherine looked toward Ivy standing beside Elliot and Marcus. "A young woman came here 5 years ago. She had nothing. No money, no home, no family. She came from a hell no one should ever have to endure." Her voice softened. "But she had something many people don't. She had eyes that could see people. She saw the ones the world forgot." She smiled. "Miracles don't come down from the sky. Miracles come from people who dare to look into the darkness and find the light." After the ceremony, Elliot walked over to Ivy. The boy was fully healthy now, cheeks rosy and eyes as clear as ever. "Ivy, do you still feel invisible?" he asked. Ivy looked down at the child who had seen her when no one else did, and she smiled. "No, not with you." Marcus stood a short distance away, watching his son and Ivy, watching Sister Catherine and the people who had once been homeless now laughing together. Leo came to his side. "You all right?" Marcus nodded, and for the first time in his life, the answer was true. "Yeah, for the first time in my life, I really am." Night fell, and when the ceremony ended and everyone had gone home, Marcus and Elliot sat on the front steps of the new center, looking up at a sky full of stars. This was the kind of peace Marcus had once believed he would never have. "Do you remember when I asked you about homeless people?" Elliot asked softly. "That breakfast?" Marcus nodded, remembering the fateful morning that had changed everything. "I remember. I said it was complicated." Elliot tilted his head toward his father. "So, is it still complicated now?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, then he smiled. "No. It's actually very simple." He looked at his son, the child who had taught him more than anyone ever had. "When you see someone who needs help, you help. When you see someone who's invisible, you see them. When you have more than you need, you share." Elliot smiled, warm as sunlight. "That's what I thought from the beginning." Marcus pulled his son into his arms. "And you were right all along." From a distance, Ivy watched the two of them. Sister Catherine came up beside her and rested a hand on her shoulder. "You've found a family," she said. Ivy nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. "I have." Marcus Ashford, the Mafia boss who once believed he controlled everything, who believed money and power were all that mattered, finally understood what his 12-year-old son had tried to teach him from the start. The greatest things in life are not things. Not money, not houses, not cars, not power. They are moments. They are people. They are the love we give and the love we receive. The simple acts that carry the power to change the world. Seeing someone who has been invisible all their life and saying to them, "I see you. You matter. You belong here." That isn't complicated. That is everything. And that is the lesson this story wants to offer all of us. In the rush of everyday life, we often pass the people around us without truly seeing them. The lottery ticket seller on the corner, the street sweeper in the early morning, the elderly person sitting alone in the park. They are there, but we do not see them. Stop, even if only for a second. See them. Smile at them. Let them know they are not invisible. Because sometimes, all a person needs is for someone to truly see them. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, hit like, and share this video with the people you love. Every subscription, every like, every share is a powerful encouragement that helps us keep bringing meaningful stories to you each day. How did this story make you feel? Have you ever met someone who made you feel seen when you thought you were invisible? Or have you been the one who saw someone the world forgot? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We would truly love to hear the stories from deep in your hearts. Because every story matters. Every voice deserves to be heard. Thank you for taking the time to watch today's video. We wish everyone watching good health, a life filled with joy, and peace each day. Remember, you are not invisible. You matter, and you deserve to be loved. Goodbye, and we will see you in the next video.